Hey there, Rabanzo here. Judy Rodman of All Things Vocal is my guest for this episode. We talk about the impact emotion has on vocal performance, vocal production for the studio, singing your best live, and vocal technique for interviews. Let's do it. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. This is a return appearance by Judy Rodman of All Things Vocal. We had a chance to meet in person, I was going to say last month, and it was actually October 2019. It's already the beginning of December as I'm recording this, but what a treat it was to meet her in person. And she was one of the very first recipients of the new Unstarving Musician podcast sticker. You want one, don't you? I'm going to make them available on the website sometime soon, I promise. And you know what? I'm probably going to throw them on the support page. Maybe, some sort of support swag. What am I talking about? I'm talking about supporting the podcast. Let me take a moment to tell you how you can do that, why it's so important. It's so important because it helps me keep this podcast going. It's always going to be free for you, but you know what? It costs me a little money, so I don't mind asking you guys if you can give me a hand. One of the things you can do that won't cost you a cent to support the podcast is to join the Unstarving Musician community. To do so, just go to unstarvingmusician.com and sign up right there on the homepage. What are you signing up for? Well, it's for an occasional email from yours truly. I will share in those emails upcoming podcast episodes, but arguably of more importance, hacks, tips, mistakes, all the tools that the musicians I'm talking to and have spoken to for many, many months about this project, for the podcast, about the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, all the things that we musicians are out there doing, we've talked about and we continue to talk about and continue to explore new ways. But I share a lot of what is going on in these emails that you will get for free. Nothing spammy and not too many, not too frequently. And you know what? You can unsubscribe at any time. But it'll be a huge help to me for you to join that community. Another way you can support the podcast is to pick up a copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs. How to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. It was written by me. You can get it on paperback and Kindle from Amazon and find it in other ebook formats at just about every ebook retailer, every fine ebook retailer on the interwebs. I'm probably going to make those stickers available too, where you can just buy one and say, hey, I supported you, Unstarving Musician Podcast, Rabanzo. Maybe send me a picture and like, here, get off my back. You can, that would be funny actually. But we could put it on the Twitter or something. I don't know, put it somewhere, it would be funny. But anyway, appreciate your help. So Judy, she dropped some knowledge bombs on me during the conversation, as my British pal Chris Ducker is fond of saying, knowledge bombs. But this is probably the last time I'm going to use that phrase. Oh, Did you buy anything for Black Friday? It kind of just passed. It's the beginning of December here, and it'll be long gone by the time you hear this. But did you? Well, I did, kind of. Actually, I bought something right before Black Friday, which is kind of stupid, I guess. But I don't know. I'm not into those. Even though it was all on the internet, I feel like I don't want to be there with the crowds. Like, Amazon server's probably going to be down. There's going to be so many of you buying shit. But no, anyway, I bought something. Not from Amazon. I bought something from Sweetwater. My friends at Sweetwater. I bought some really nice PA speakers, and I'm so excited, but I'm pretty sure my wife's going to grimace a little bit when she sees them, because she's going to be like, where are we going to put those things? I got to tell you this, one of my longtime buddies and former bandmates had this deal with another guitar player friend of his where they'd tell their wives that the other one had bought this guitar that had been lent to them they were checking out. It was a great scam, so this was all to keep their wives from freaking out about all the money they were spending on guitars. Pretty brilliant. I've not reached that point. I'm just saying it's a brilliant scam. I mean strategy. It's dishonest, but still, I'm not there yet, really. So, hey, this podcast is in part powered by Band Zoogle. And I'm going to tell you why you should check it out. If you're a musician and you're looking to get on podcasts or you're looking to get good gigs, and you don't have a website, you don't even have a Facebook page. Maybe you do have a Facebook page, but let me tell you, if you don't have a website, you're not going to be looked at as seriously. I'm not kidding about that. Just forgetting about gigs, but it's the same. But when people come to me for the podcast and they don't have a website, it's not like I'm going to deny them every time, but I kind of look at them like they're a little less serious about what they're doing. So, yeah. So here I am talking about it, and I got my Bandzoogle account. I haven't even set my new website up. So, but anyway, I've always had a website. It's been robonzo.com forever. I kind of I didn't retire it, but I untangled it from unstarvingmusician.com. You can still find stuff about me on unstarvingmusician.com as a musician, but I'm moving all that stuff over to Bandzoogle. Why? Because I think it's really cool. I've been in there messing around with it, checked out these templates. The thing is it was created by musicians for us musicians. So they know about the kind of things that we need. Some of the features they give you a way to sell merch. There's a download store there. You can do this kind of stuff commission free on your own website. They've got a way for you to set up a tour calendar, promote your shows, sell tickets commission free, help you grow your email list, which is huge. You know it's huge if you listen to this podcast or any podcast about building a music business or a business around your music. They have integrations for socials, and biggest of all, they have live support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. That's giganimous. So the plans start at $8.29 a month. That includes hosting and your own free custom domain. So here's what you do. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial and use the promo code ROBONZO, that's ROBONZO, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to build your artist website today. Did I sound a little bit like Joe Rogan there? I wish, kind of. Well, only in the sense that his podcast is so huge. So I got to ask Judy all kinds of selfish questions about singing. This is a great conversation if you're looking for tips or looking for someone with resources free and for purchase about vocals, about singing. Her experience is truly unparalleled, or damn near it. I bought her book right after our conversation, and she said everything she was sharing in our conversation is in there. And so you're probably thinking, well, why'd you buy the book if she shared all the secrets in your interview? Well, because I know she didn't tell me everything. We only spoke for about an hour. I'm not going to remember everything she said. I mean, I'm going to go back and listen to this, but I'm still not going to remember everything she said. But now I can really learn it. I'm reading about it, and it's a great book. It really is. I can make highlights in my Kindle. I can review it. I can be a better singer, man. Come on. So why wouldn't I buy the book? All right, here's me and Judy Rodman. Let's talk about what we were, or continue talking about, and maybe repeat a couple things that you just said for me. I was asking you how your vocal student session went today, and you mentioned some things about the particular student, and pitch caught my ear. Can you repeat what you were saying for my listeners now that we're on the official recording here?
Sure. Pitch is something I learned the hard way, I guess you'd say, by doing 7 years as a staff singer in a jingle company in Memphis. And those were in the days when tuners didn't exist. Tuners were done with anatomy. So I had to figure out some strategies and tactics, and I learned a whole lot because you either did that or you didn't work there. So I have used a lot of that. And what I've found is that I have to do some Sherlock Holmesing with each student in each situation, whether it's the studio or stage, to find out what's causing the pitchiness. And it can be anything from you're really not aiming and you don't know it. You're just, as I call it, pinning the tail on the donkey with pitch, or you are listening to something that you don't realize you're listening to, like the upper end of the bass, which is never true. So you want to lower the bass so you can hear more of the acoustic instruments like piano or guitar or acoustic guitar. Or you are struggling with some vocal technique that is limiting you. You know where the pitch is, you just can't hit it. And so then I would work on that technique to give you more control and give you more access to where that note lives. So it's really fun. I get to, as we're teaching as an art, not a science.
Yeah, you implied that it's a problem for anyone who's challenged to be as good as they can be with pitch. You gave me the impression that there are various reasons why that might be, depending on the individual. And yeah, I guess that's why you made the, what did you say, Sherlock Holmes, or what did you say?
Yes, I Sherlock Holmes the cause.
Yeah.
Root around for the cause and see how fast I can find that.
So a question that comes from personal experience, when you're dealing, like myself, with, say, I'm strumming acoustic guitar and I've got an electric guitar going, next to me and bass. No percussion, but I've got those three instruments there. You mentioned, I think you even said acoustic guitar. In that situation, am I better off listening specifically to the acoustic or either or?
Absolutely, you are. Absolutely. And if you're not mic'd, say you're in a rehearsal setting, what you can do is use these gadgets that I sell actually from my studio. They're amazing gadgets that were created in Boston in the US. They're called hearphones. And they were originally designed to help choir members hear themselves in a choir setting as they're rehearsing. But they also are great for like rehearsal. They sort of have these protruding plastic pieces that do a lot better than cupping your hand at your ear. It's really a great rehearsal tool. And then you memorize the sensation of where the pitch is.
Now that's cool. That makes so much sense the first part of your response. I was out road testing some material, and it was also this is also the first time in a long time I've been singing with a guitar in my hand. And so I went to an open mic with a friend who was accompanying me on electric, and we've done it on several occasions. So the first change for me was he and I were rehearsing, and I had a true acoustic guitar, and then I went to the open mic and used the friend's electric acoustic. So suddenly I didn't have the haptic kind of feedback. And the first time I went with no in-ears because I just didn't know if I'd be able to use them. The monitor was so bad, but I noticed right away, like, wow, I can't hear my instrument. And I knew that I was struggling.
Pin the tail on the donkey time.
Yeah. So that makes good sense, but what a great tip. Since the last time not the last time we spoke, I guess I have to say for anyone who doesn't know you and me, you and me, that we got to meet for the first time in person in Nashville just last month. We're recording, I guess, toward the tail end of November now, but just last month, and that was really fun. Thank you for coming out to see me and a couple of my friends and family.
Now I know you're really real.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was lovely.
I don't know if you saw my pixies on Instagram, but I put some out there, and I'll put some, I'll at least use as one of the photos for this episode featuring you of when we met. But you have been on the podcast before, so I was going to preface the question with the last time we spoke, I recall, and I didn't go back and re-listen, just before today's episode to our prior conversation to refresh my memory, but I recall we talked a lot about your vocal coaching business and courses, and it certainly wasn't something new, but it seemed to be taking a bit of some new direction. You maybe had, I'm not even remember the specifics, but you maybe had some new courses going on. And I assume, based on our brief time talking about that when I saw you in Nashville, that it is still the same. But I am curious. I just wanted to ask, is this still one of the biggest things you're doing? Or I know you do and have so many things you have done. So I'd love to hear, and for others to hear, where you're focusing your time within music now.
Yes, it is my main gig. My main job is mentoring others vocally. And so it's really wonderful because then I get to be a part of a lot of people's journeys in a lot of different genres. It's really interesting for me. So I do have a lot of courses that are available. My newest thing in that realm is an ebook a book too, ebook and paper book of my singing in the studio training. And that's available now on Amazon along with my website. The link to it is on my website. It's the very first time I've ever had a real paperback, so that was kind of fun.
Oh, that's cool. So tell me right now, I'm going to find it where on your website? Products?
Yes.
Singing in the studio?
It should be in there. If it's not, I haven't updated it. I think I did. Can you see it?
Let's see. I'm looking at that page, and that's okay. At least I have this link to remind me. I think I see it, yeah. Is it so? You said Amazon, so it's on Kindle and paperback?
It's on Kindle and paperback, yes.
That's very cool. Did you say that's the first time you've done Kindle?
Yes, it is.
Wasn't that exciting?
It is. It was. I feel like a real author. Although I've been selling vocal training courses since 2004.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully you had the luxury of repurposing or using some of the vast amounts of content you've already created since 2004 and possibly before when you put together this new book. But if you didn't and did all new material, that's probably great too.
Well, here's the other thing that I'm going to leak out there. I do have a really big project. It may be the last project that I do because it's so comprehensive, but I'm doing a video course for the first time, or, you know, an all video course. And it will be about like 12 different chapters, different specific things about the voice. And then each chapter will be about 45 minutes long. And then I'll divide that, because of our attention span, I'll divide it into like 10 or 15 minute increments, so sub chapters. And then I'm going to be making that available. But that'll take about probably 6 months to a year to do. And then I'll have it. So if people can look forward to that, that would be great.
I should feature you on the other podcast I do too. It's for small business owners and the entrepreneurial spirited. But I just had a gentleman on who is doing, I guess he's been delving into video courses, online courses recently, but he was sharing with me something that perhaps you've already heard, but he's been hearing in a lot of circles repetitively, different circles, that there's this trend going on right now with them, that the creator, in this case you, is participating in a somewhat live fashion. So there's some, you know, the pre-recorded stuff, but there's some interaction throughout with
membership sites,
the creator. Well, no, specifically with the course though, but yes, on a membership site too. But the reason he brought it up was because he was also hearing about all of these challenges with video courses, just because the evolution. But you have so many people that buy them that never take them. You have so many people that buy them, they start them, they never finish them. And where in the past we'd seen so many that were created to kind of set and not forget, but, you know, set and let them create recurring revenue. The big point, the overarching point, was now he's looking at being involved each time the course is made available, so that he can have interaction with the students and make sure they get through, and that'll make him feel a lot better.
Yeah. That's good information.
Yeah. The other thing and I know that a few of the people who listen to the podcast have thought about or are thinking about or have done a book, and maybe done one very recently. Something I learned when I published mine, I really wanted to get it on, I didn't want it to be only on Kindle. I thought it was real important for me to have it on Apple Books. This is what I was thinking. I'm like, that's got to be the next biggest place. And I found that so difficult to do, but then I ran across a website. I better look it up now. I believe it's called Publish Drive. And let's double check here. I think it's publishdrive.com. And actually, I may have found them through, no, I didn't find them through Kobo. So Kobo.com is another great place, because they will put your work out on many, many other ebook retailers other than Amazon, and Amazon if you want. But what Publish Drive did for me was they gave me a place where I could give them the content for Apple, and they put it on Apple for me and several other places, including Kobo. Kobo's kind of cool. It's sort of like to me, it looks like an alternate ebook universe to Amazon, where other people with other e-readers check that stuff out. But anyway, if you care to talk offline more about that, or for anybody else who is thinking about it, I guess look at Kobo.com, Kobo, and Published. And happy to share my experiences in more detail, but I thought I'd tell you that because it was a big frustration for me back when I did the book, and I was like, oh, wow, I could have just done it all right here. But I'm glad I did work like you did, I'm sure, directly with Amazon for the paperback and the Kindle version. Are you still doing a good amount of the vocal production studio kind of work as well?
I am. I'm doing a lot of vocal production. Sometimes I'll do the whole thing, and sometimes I'll just be the vocal producer with a production team headed by another producer. The last thing I did actually was go down to Key West and play the trop rock convention called Meeting of the Minds. That's an annual trop rock convention down there with my artist that she's my vocal student and my co-writer and my production client. So we went down there and did some of the songs off the album that I produced for her. And then I actually got to sing some of my songs as well. So it was a blast. You never know what you're going to get to do. And I like keeping a few oars in the water instead of just one. I find that when I get to do something like sing or write or produce, it always goes into my vocal production or my vocal training as well, because it just makes everything very professionally real and relevant.
Yeah, you know what? And that's an inadvertent tip for anyone, I guess, and for myself as a podcaster. I'm sure that I have done it, but don't do it so intentionally. But anytime I'm out doing some sort of gig or supporting one or whatever, they lend great experiences to share with others, or maybe like you're doing, create some content with. Did we talk about you going to Key West when I saw you in Nashville?
I don't even know if we did. I don't even know if we did. Yeah, I'm kind of live from day to day and don't know what I'm doing unless I'm looking at my calendar.
I feel you. I asked that about Key West because, and I surely mentioned when we saw you, we had come from Key West to Nashville when I saw you.
Oh, we may have talked about that. Yeah, we may have talked about that.
I think you did. You tell me. And when were you there?
I was there over the Halloween weekend, which is crazy time. It's kind of like, I don't know, a combination of Mardi Gras in New Orleans and the CMA Fest in Nashville. It's like people soup.
I know that you did mention something now because you were going after it shortly after we saw you. Well, I'm glad that was something fun. And you know what? I was going to mention that because we were talking about this earlier. We were talking about the Sherlock Holmesing the pitch thing with some of your students. I've had another guy on the podcast a couple of times, and the last time he was on, he's a producer based out of San Jose, California, and quite a musician and showman, but he hasn't been a singer first. He's married to a woman who is a singer first in her music life, but he was telling me that his production work has really helped him be a better singer, but has more importantly helped him help others be a better singer. And I was really curious about how that was. And he just said one thing that really stuck with me. And so he's in the blues genre, which might maybe explains a little bit of the experience that he was having repeatedly with some of his clients. Is he said it was really weird. They weren't treating their voice like an instrument, one of the instruments in the track. It was, I guess the impression, not his words, but it was a little more nonchalant or secondary. And I think however he framed it with them, just that realization made him suddenly turn a corner in helping all of his clients realize that their vocal potential was so much greater. But plus, now that I think about it, his wife too is a vocal coach, and it probably made him realize, hey, I can help them. My wife can help them. They can be helping us if they hire her. So have you noticed anything like that with people when they're in the studio?
For sure. In fact, it's so common that the engineer or producer doesn't know how to help the client do what they want them to do. I mean, sometimes they know what they want the client to do, but they don't know how to get the client doing it, the singer doing it. So I actually created a course, a kind of a sister course to Singing in the Studio called Vocal Production Workshop. And I used my 50 years of being in the studio working with engineers to teach pro audio teams. So what it is a 2-hour DVD of my 2-hour workshop at the Musicians Union here in Nashville for about 40 professional recording engineers and producers that came for the workshop. And we talked about, it's not gear-based. What's important are things like, where do you put your singer at the mic? And almost always they'll have the music stand in front and probably the cue box, sort of at the side there, right in front, where the person can reach it. But the problem is then the singer inevitably will reach over, bend their body over a little bit towards the pop filter. And that immediately causes them to lose some control. So the first thing I'll say is move the music stand and move the cue box so the person can move into the mic with their feet. And that way, their head is back over their heel and the rib cage is then open. The diaphragm is more stretched, and you don't even have to think about it. And then you can use your hands underneath it like I teach people to do without hitting the stand or the cue box or the mic. And so just something as simple as that can make the engineer or producer into the singer's hero instead of the thing that frustrates the singer. And the singer will end up not being frustrated, not getting strained, and things like that. Another thing that engineers and producers don't know how to do is get more from the singer. When they ask for, okay, this pass, give it all you got, or something to that effect, well, the singer will inevitably push too hard. Instead of doing that, they need to be more communicatively articulate and passionate. And that opens the throat and gives a richer volume, not the thin, the pushed volume, but the richer volume that comes when the volume's backed off, but the throat is more open. And also just more communicative tone and choice of nuances of style, which makes the vocal more powerful because it elicits a stronger response from the heart. The lyric is two, and that's the brass ring. So, there's lots of singer things that engineers and producers need to know, and they can be the best in the whole universe with the gear, but they'll end up just frustrating the singer because they can't tell the singer how to do what they want them to do. So anyway, that's on my website as well, Vocal Production Workshop.
You're listening to my conversation with Judy Rodman, and this is a track from an album she recorded in 2015. The track is called Somethin Like That. Check it out.
Brown eyes and a mystery, yeah. Big holes in the safety net. Are you sure what you think he meant? Careful though, you get yourself stuck. Pick one cause you can't have two. It's the turkey dinner or the chicken stew. When you can't tell if you win or lose. Close your eyes and wish yourself luck. Count the silver, hide the gold. Steal a rock from another load. Good times sometime come and go, especially when you want it real bad. Did it fill you up? Did it ease your pain? If you did it do over, would you do it again? Would you put it out there, the best you ever had? Or something like that.
Is there a direct connection between the emotional aspect with which we articulate when we sing and the openness of the throat? Or when you mention the openness of the throat, are we really just talking about being with the voice, the head over your heels?
No, there's definitely an emotional component to it. Your intention to communicate a message to a heart changes everything. Your intention changes everything. And to prove that point, I do this little acting exercise I call the Ardvark exercise. And would you like for me to go through it?
Yeah, I have a vague memory of it, but yes, please.
Okay. It's like I'll have people say, I am an Ardvark. And I'll have them say it in like 4 different scenarios. The first is where it doesn't mean anything and you're not talking to anybody. And it usually comes out like, I am an Ardvark. Okay. The second time it is to a bully that has just called you an Ardvark, which is an insult. And so what do you want in response? You want that bully to feel intimidated. So you might say it like, I am an Ardvark. Well, that's a way different use of my throat and my face and my body language and everything. And it changes tone, not just visibly, but over the phone. So if you're singing a song that means something, but your face is blank and you don't have the, that intention to make that person feel that specific thing, it's going to be like a zombie singing. And even if you do sound good, it'll be like maybe you might win survival of the vocal cords for a second, by hitting a high note, but there won't be any meaning in your choices of tone and how much your face is open. Like if I'm mad or something, I might want to go, I am an Ardvark, and that communicates something. If I'm being playful, it's I am an Ardvark, and that gives a whole different message. But see, what should drive the position of the throat or the condition of the throat and the openness of the channel is what would it take in tone to get the response you're looking for?
Yeah, that's I can't even find the right word. I was going to say that's interesting, amazing, but we've talked a little bit about this, and I'm so glad we're revisiting it. When we spoke about it before, I wasn't as much in need because I just wasn't singing as much, and here I am, and hopefully, everyone listening is like, oh wow, this is great. But here I find myself singing more, and revisiting that topic is so much more meaningful for me today.
When you're singing in the studio, you're always a time traveler, right? And even as we're doing this podcast, we're talking to each other for an audience that doesn't exist right now. They're not in the present moment. They will exist in the future. Hopefully somebody will listen to it. And that gives us a reason.
Judy, this is the Unstarving Musician podcast. Somebody's going to listen to
it. Yeah. That's what should drive the choices that we make when we make sound.
And when I do these interviews, I'm very focused on the interviewee, at least I could argue I am communicating to you for the listeners, but it's something to think about. But when I do the intros for these, so I'm building up to you, and then I'm talking about some other stuff, and particularly when I start talking about anything personal before we get to the interview section, you're right. I'm more thoughtful of everyone who's listening at that moment. When I speak with you or any of my guests, I'm concentrating on what you're saying, trying to pick up things, fodder for other questions. I'm thinking ahead a little bit. I'm thinking about questions that I have right in front of me. And probably the audience gets a little buried in that. So it's something for me to think about just when I'm podcasting. But yeah, really great tip.
When I'm working with business people that do teleseminars and even musicians when they're needing to do interviews and stuff, it's very important to think of every spoken thing that you do as interactive. Even if you don't hear the response coming from the other side, you imagine it. And that's singing too, singing or speaking. You imagine the response to every line that you sing or that you say. And you have to know, it really just needs to be logical. What am I saying? What does it mean? Who am I talking to? Why am I saying this to that person? What response from that person would make me know that my message got through? And that's what tells my voice what to do.
So in a true sense, interviews are not really different than what we want to do when we're singing. In the case of the interview, on both sides of the microphone, yours and mine, we want to think of the entire audience. And also in my case, as I said, my guest that I'm speaking to. So I want to think about the response for my audience, correct?
No, here that's tricky. Okay. You want to think about the response from me. If you ask me a question, you want to almost, you want to ask it so that my eyebrows come up or my attention perks up or something like that tells you that I'm listening and that I'm understanding you. So that's the tricky thing. Who are we talking to? That's so important to know. When Taylor Swift is singing, someday I'll be living in a big old city and all you're ever going to be is mean. My God, that's not to the audience. I hope not, right?
Right.
It's to the bully for the audience. So you and I are saying these things that we're saying to benefit the audience that we know is listening, but we're not talking directly to them. And if I am, okay, audience, I'm talking to you now. I'm so glad you're here with us. And I really appreciate, because I know time is expensive, and I appreciate the fact that you are listening to my episode on Roberto's podcast. But if I'm talking to you, Roberto, I'm looking for your eyes. I'm looking, to get your reaction. So it's different.
Yeah, it makes sense. And my head has been in the right space in that I focus on what you're saying or any of my guests are saying because it helps me a lot with the interview. But neat little inadvertent tip there. I don't know. Maybe I do this sometimes, but I do. I'll say things like, for those of you that are listening, But however, I could take a moment to step back as I do when I do most of the intros, or at least I try to, is to feel, that I'm in their earbuds in the moment when I'm doing that intro. I sort of think of that. And I think perhaps we'll lose a little bit of sight of that because I'm so focused on my guests, which is, I'm sure, it's okay. But
it's very common. It's very common. There's a little secret about this, and that is use your eyes like the person is really in front of you. When we do teleseminars or podcasts or things like that, we're not seeing the person. So a lot of times the part of your face above your nose is not working because it doesn't need to. We think, well, who's looking at us? But if you use your eyes, it'll be like you're right in front of them. And instead of thinking about something, you're doing something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm sitting here going, gosh, I know I was going to get so many tips for the podcast too here, much less for the singing stuff.
Well, it's really, really, really important for musicians. Very few artists know how to use their voice in interviews.
I believe it. And, here's this one just popped in my head. I've played with artists live who have such good control of the sound of their voice between songs when they're talking to the audience, and they sound so amazing. Most of the people I've worked with, not so much. There's one guy that comes to mind specifically. Is he probably using he's had some formal training, but is he probably using a lot of these tips, or is there something more to that? We're done with our song and then we want to speak to the audience. To me, I feel like when I speak to the audience, my voice is kind of like, I don't know, like it's muffled, and I guess it's because I've suddenly gone somewhat emotionless, even though I might be saying something in my head that I think is funny, but somehow it's probably just disconnection. But what?
It's that transition from intending or thinking about saying something to somebody to actually doing it. And one thing that helps everybody that I work with, including myself, is to imagine whoever it is that I am talking to, whatever heart it is, that they're partially deaf. And so that changes the way I articulate. And the other thing is to remember that singing is very much an acting exercise, okay? And as Sanford Meisner says, I use this quote a lot, great acting is behaving authentically in fictional circumstances, okay? Mm. So if you know the movie scene that you're in, your voice should reflect that. It's really like doing a reading and you go into character. So every song that we sing is a different movie scene. And you have to set yourself, and you'll see great artists doing this. You set yourself into that movie scene during the intro. Then you go into the movie scene and you don't break character until after you're done and the audience is clapping, and then you come up for air. The audience is here. It's very much like doing a reading.
Makes sense. I thought about someone earlier in our conversation. You reminded me of her again. So there's a Prima ballerina that Sammy, my wife, and I are acquainted with, who from San Jose, from our years in San Jose. Mm-hmm. So a couple amazing things about her was she was prima ballerina into her early 40s, which is pretty amazing, and she'd probably stab me in the chest for saying that. But when we went to see her perform, and she's surrounded by a number of great dancers and performers, but when her moments came, she was so expressive with not only her body, but her face. Mm-hmm. And it made her stand out so much. Mm-hmm. And I guess that came to my mind because of what we're talking about here and the expressiveness. And she was clearly doing what you said, an actor does this whole being authentic in fictitious situation, but she was clearly communicating with all of us that were in the audience in doing so.
Yeah. What's funny is what the face does affects the body. It's really hard, even if you're a dancer, to be expressive in your body if your face is numb. They go together. I think the reason is that what our face does is trigger the automatic nervous system to, okay, this is what we're doing. We're delivering a message. And all art is message. So what message are we delivering? Let's get all the sled dogs, to mix a metaphor, all the sled dogs pulling in the same direction.
I don't know if I've ever told you this, Judy, or if you've picked it up from anything you might have seen about me on the website, but I'm a big, big, big fan of the Rolling Stones. And when we talk about
Oh, I love the Rolling Stones.
Well, when we talk about facial expression, I think, okay, how do we explain and break down Mick Jagger and facial expressions, his vocal performances, and his body in two different, very extremely different environments for him, studio and live?
Well, if he didn't do some of the things he does live in the studio, he would not sound like he does live. It can't be just a physical sort of staging that causes him to use his face and his body the way he does live. Some of that body language, obviously not the moving around so much, but some of that body language and a lot of that face is going to go into his studio singing to make him sound like Mick Jagger. Because it changes the configuration of the open throat. It changes the message that's being delivered and everything else. And I'd bet money, all the money I've got there and don't have, that Mick Jagger does not sing in the studio with his hands numbly at his side. Because what your hands and arms do affect your rib cage, which affects your control. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it that we don't even realize. And some people just naturally do it right and do it. But you'll notice that people that are really just naturally good at it are using their bodies and their faces.
And I'm thinking of a number of people that I've seen, probably the majority of which not at, a big pro level, that have a lot of moments of lifelessness when there's not necessarily so much in their voice, but just in their demeanor, which is probably greatly limiting, as we're talking about, or at least somewhat limiting their ability to
communicate.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing to know is that, Mick Jagger and Andre Bocelli use body language really, really differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that Andre Bocelli is not using body language, because if you look really closely, he's blind, right?
Mm.
If you look really closely, you can see his eye sockets moving, the skin around his eye sockets. You can see a little bit of his getting a little bit taller. Different genres express this thing that affects your voice in different ways. Celine Dion may raise her hand to the ceiling. Well, that's really opening the rib cage. Whereas
she does do that. She's very expressive, and I don't watch her a lot, but every time I see her, I'm kind of fixated on her particular movements and facial expressions.
Well, yeah, there you go. But the thing to know is that what your face and your hands and your arms do, and the position of your head as far as where it's balanced in your body, all of that matters to the voice.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. And it's very interesting.
I love this subject myself.
What about, those of us that are always holding an instrument? Let's take guitar or bass. I don't know if they're going to be that much different, or God forbid, drums, and are singing.
There isn't any difference, or keyboard, right? Here's the deal. I saw one time when I was doing backgrounds, this is many years ago, when Johnny Cash was doing a vocal. And this was the days of the simul sessions, when the musicians and the background singers and the lead singer were all in the same room, big room and huge ceiling at RCA back in the day. I saw the engineer, we nicknamed Snake, Snake Reynolds, send the second engineer down with Johnny's guitar without the strings on it. And I thought that was pretty wild. I didn't know why they were doing that. I figured, well, maybe he's just familiar with it. It just makes him feel comfortable. Well, it did, and I'm sure the engineer didn't know why, but they just noticed that he did better with his instrument in his arms, and they didn't want the strings to buzz, so they took the strings off. But now what I know is that when a guitar player is used to singing and playing simultaneously, or a keyboard player or a bass player, if they're doing it well, the use of the instrument is going to be widening their rib cage, and that gives them vocal control. And they're not cognitively present with that fact, but it just does. So when they take the instrument off, or they're not at the piano, what happens to the hands and arms? They become limp rib anchors. And so they lose control, and then they don't know what to do. So what I do that works fabulously is I buy them by the dozen, several dozen at a time. I give all my instrumental players or singers that play instruments a back scratcher. And I put the back scratcher between their palms, and then all of a sudden, they've got this vocal control. Well, why? And this is for the studio. Obviously, they're not going to do that live. But in the studio, you put that back scratcher between their palms, and they're on stage with their instrument.
And we're talking about like their palms are about 12 inches or 18 inches apart from one another with a back scratcher. Is that
Exactly. It's horizontal between their palms. And all it's doing is increasing the circumference of the bottom of the rib cage where the diaphragm is attached, which widens the diaphragm and gives breath control, which is the secret to vocal control.
And quite possibly kind of straightening the shoulders up a little bit when they do that?
Oh, yeah. It balances. It's almost like it sort of balances them back a little bit, helps them balance so they're not front heavy. If they don't have an instrument in their hands or under their hands, they become front heavy because they don't have anything that they usually use to keep them balanced.
That's so interesting. And for the different type of singer who's not holding an instrument during their performances, they're a little more accustomed, I take it, to hopefully to having their hands in positions that allow for a similar experience, physical experience.
Yeah. So they'll use the mic itself, and I that's where I have to teach mic technique about holding, the way you hold a mic and you squeeze it to help you get taller. There's I call it's pulling, but you don't pull the mic away because then you'd lose your signal. So you keep the mic at your mouth, but you kind of squeeze it, sort of like milking a cow. If you've ever done that, I have.
I have not.
And yeah, well, you have to think about it. But anyway, so you sort of feel that pull, which opens you up three-dimensionally and does the same thing that the back scratcher does for instrumentalists. Also, if you're singing without holding a mic, say musical theater, where you're wearing a headset like I am right now, or doing an audition, or you're doing a spot at the Grammys where they want you to stand behind a straight stand in your long red dress with a spotlight on you, they don't want you to move much. You got to know what happens with your hands and arms matter. So I'll have people hang their hands at your sides maybe, but move your hands or move your arms back a little bit so that your elbows are a little behind you. And then you've still got that wide rib cage. Or people that use rockers that use the stand, put two hands on the stand. There's a way to pull with the stand to, again, widen the rib cage and balance you back a little bit. And even if you're leaning forward, you can use the stand to open you up three-dimensionally in your torso.
Suddenly, all those poses come clear.
Makes sense. Right. You know, people that do that don't know what they're doing. But boy, somebody that works with them in the studio better know, because they need to be able to get that magic in the studio. Hence the back scratcher.
Great production tip. 2 set of production tips.
Uh-huh.
All right. So you have this new course that you're spending a lot of time on. We talked about a few different things. Did we get in? I'm not sure that we got too far into it. I think we scraped the surface of the topic of that, or have we been talking about it all this time in a roundabout way?
Well, the cool thing about the course is, and you know, people's attention span is getting shorter and shorter because of the digital nature of the world. But the cool thing about this is kind of a legacy product. I haven't done anything on this scale since I created my 6-disc course, but this one's going to be bigger and longer, and it will be in sections, in chapters, so that people that aren't interested in the singing voice can just buy my chapter on the speaking voice, so that people that are interested in group singing can just buy that chapter, and et cetera. So there'll be standalone chapters subdivided into entries so that people can digest the information. But that way they can just buy what they want, and then of course they'll get a discount on buying more of them or all of them.
When's it coming out?
Well, I have to record it first. So this is just a little leak that I'm in the process of trying to do it. So hopefully it'll be within the next year.
Cool. Put me on the VIP notification list for when
I'll
it's
do
out.
it. You bet, Roberto.
It's so funny. I don't have to prepare a lot for this conversation because I know Judy now. We have some stuff to talk about. And the one, you know, it's funny. There was one question. I was looking over some of your recent stuff, and I'm like, I got to ask her about that. And I almost forgot. But anyway, it was at the top of my list, and somehow it's ending at the bottom of the conversation. But you had a blog post, or maybe it was a guest blog post, and you featured the topic in a recent episode of your podcast, which is All Things Vocal. Did I get it right?
Yes.
And I believe the title is Best Streaming Services to Put Your Music On. No, that's not the title, but that's kind of what it's about.
Be smart about streaming your music, right?
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of people saying a lot of different things about it, but I'd love to hear what your perspective is, whether it's brand new from your collaboration with this individual or just something that was time to do on your website and your podcast.
This was a company that queried me about doing a guest post on my blog. And I never do that. I hardly ever do that. I write my own blog. And if I do get a guest post, I commission the guest poster on a specific topic that I know they're an expert in. And that's, I do interviews and things like that. But this was something that I am definitely not an expert in streaming. Okay. I'm a wedge woman. I'm from the pre-digital days, even though I do have in-ears now. There's some things that I'm not just an expert on, and streaming is one of them. And I thought All Things Vocal, most people that are doing all things vocal, that are anything vocal, are needing to stream it. So I thought the subject was really interesting, and especially breaking it down. There's a link on it to a very comprehensive review of the major streaming services and why you might want to pick a particular one based on your particular music and what you're trying to get done and the audience that you think fits that music.
Was there a thing or two that really stood out for you as particularly interesting? Because it sounds like it was a learning conversation for you. What really stood out?
Well, what really stood out for me is that there's reasons to make a choice and to kind of focus on certain services. I know that there's a reason to be on certain social networking sites. Like, you got to find where your audience is.
Right.
But I didn't know that there's like a difference in the streaming services like Spotify over Tidal, over YouTube. There's pros and cons to spending the money and the energy to market your music on a particular avenue. Of course, most everybody's on Spotify, and that's great. But then again, you can get lost there too. So Tidal music is more specific they're looking for higher quality music, I think, but there's not as many on there. So it's like, if I were into streaming, if I were really, and I may be getting into streaming with some of the things I'm doing, but I would look on that review, that link that goes into the comprehensive reviews of each service and see. The other thing, of course, is to realize that you make very little money per stream. You have to think of it as volume and as scaling. You really have to have tons of streaming. It's more of a residual thing. So that was interesting to see how they broke down. And each streaming service pays really, really differently. So just to kind of study it. Artists these days need to study streaming. They need to study licensing, mechanical licensing, if they write their own songs. They need to study things I never needed to know. So there's a lot about independent music that's awesome because we can control our own destiny, sort of. And whining doesn't help. You just got to dig in. You got to dig in and learn.
Yeah.
The bad thing is that we have to do it. We get to do it, and we have to do it. It's according to the way you look at it.
Yeah, and for anyone who might have just gotten discouraged by that, because I think, well, how do artists not get discouraged? And particularly if you've been in the business for a long time, maybe, I don't know. Maybe whether you're new or not in the business, it can be overwhelming and discouraging. There's a guy, he's today's featured guest, Mark Phoenix, and he was a longtime producer in LA, and he's in kind of a new chapter with his career. He's decided, I'm going to start doing my own solo stuff. And he's moved out of LA and all this. But to him, he said the opportunity, he said in today's music scene that he really likes is the opportunity to be of service and connect with your audience as a, kind of something you got to do, but he sees it as a really good thing. And, he's out there learning a lot of new things because, again, he was a producer for a number of years, and now he's doing this. Before I forget, those of you listening, you can find Judy's podcast and the specific episode we're talking about at judyrodman.podbean.com. And I know you're also on Apple Podcasts and looks like Google as well, and probably a bunch of other places.
Right. And one easy way to remember it, because you'll find everything from there. I put links to the different places it's hosted, or some of the different places it's hosted everywhere, but not hosted. It's streamed everywhere. But just go to www.allthingsvocal.com.
Excellent. Yeah, and the episode is a very recent one from the 17th of November this year in 2019, if you're listening in the future. And it's titled Be Smart About Streaming Your Music. And it looks pretty interesting. And like you said, those links would be very helpful. It seems like it would give people a great head start especially if they're just getting into it, or maybe they kind of recently started streaming and they're kind of already wondering, like, did I do this the right way or the best way?
Yes, exactly. As far as getting discouraged, the thing to know is that it's a never-ending learning curve. I feel like life is a never-ending learning curve. Whether it's about my teaching, I'm always learning something new. And as far as music marketing goes, if you're about to do a recording project, you really want to get up to speed as fast as you can, and instead of just throwing it out and wishing it luck, and then whining about it because it's not successful. That's the thing, is just to take the magic out of it and realize you got to come with really quality stuff as far as the music goes. Quality production, quality songs, quality vocals and instrumentals. And then once you've got the product, then find out where your audience is. And there's lots of different ways to find out. Some is just like develop your Facebook page and your Twitter following and Instagram and things like that. And you've got to kind of be willing to dig in there and do that and connect with people. But of course, the other way to do it is to play out every single place you possibly can, because that's the way that's never changed. When you make that one-on-one friend, and that's why it was so cool to meet you in person, that makes it really personal. But the bottom line is, make great music and find your ideal audience for that great music. And if you love it, then you can bet somebody else is going to love it. You just have to figure out who they are and where they congregate.
You may have just, answered what I thought might be my last question here for you is, you said, make great music to the point that you love it. But the question was going to be, do you have any hacks or tricks or advice for people who are more than anything focused on live performing when it comes to making the product as great as it can be? Or are there no shortcuts? You just got to rehearse and put in 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours or whatever it is.
To make, focus on the vocal. The vocal is the most important part of any project that's got a vocal on it. Because you could go with piano vocal, or guitar vocal. That would be better than full orchestral instruments and a mediocre vocal, because you don't have enough money to spend on some vocal training right before, pre-production, or time in the studio. You only have like 15 minutes a song. It's so counterproductive. So that's what I would say. Focus on the vocal. And my second tip would be, if you can do a project where you can hire a producer, that would be great, because it's hard to cut the back of your own hair. So find a producer who gets you and understands who you are and what you love and what you want what would make you really love that final outcome. And gather your team, your producer or your producer and your vocal producer and your engineer and all that. If you build a team around it, build the team that can still leave you enough money to do the best vocal that you possibly can. And then learn how to get the magic that you get in your live stage. Learn how to get that in the studio, which of course means you're going to go buy my Amazon book. But it truly does have a lot of hacks in it.
It sounds like life advice, and I will definitely... What's the title of the book?
Singing in the Studio.
Singing in the Studio by Judy Rodman.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I'm going to pick that up. I'll put it in the show notes for those of you listening. Judy, thank you so much for spending time with me again. This went by fast, and I knew it would be easy.
You got it. You got it.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? Yep, they're powering websites for musicians all over the world. Their easy system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you custom design your site and content. It's built for musicians by musicians. They make it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a free trial, and be sure to use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.